Hey everybody, what's up, man? Hold the truth hostage, where the truth was so important, wouldn't negotiate with lies, would hold the truth hostage. Full-time ghosting isn't an option, it's the only choice. Full-time ghost, you know? Man, what's up, man? What's up, everybody? Oh man, you know, days like this, man, you know, days like this, bro. Look at that. You know, it's October, right? October, you know, whatever the day is, October 2025, man. Look at that, you know. Look at that, bro. Look at that, my guys. Look at that, guys. Look at that, man. October 2025, man. You know, what's funny about all this is that, man, you know, I started the full-time ghosting, you know, its origins, the Casper pill, over 3 years ago. You know what I'm saying? Maybe over 4 years ago, you know? And now it's full-time ghosting, and look, man, look what's happening around you, you know? There's a reason why, you know, YouTube, you know, placed me under, he's a threat to characteristics of people, right? I mean, you know, we all know what characteristics it is, closet, you know. We know what it is, you know. We know that the heterosexual male is deemed the most dangerous man on earth right now in the USA, you know, the heterosexual male. You know, you could put the sign, warning, warning, warning. Hey, this is a straight male's channel. Warning, warning. This is a heterosexual male channel. Be aware. Warning, warning, warning. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, shout out to the homie Kalala I was chopping it up with. You know what I mean? We were reminiscing about that, you know. I used to open up streams with a warning. This is a straight male channel. Warning. You know what I mean? And YouTube puts, you know what, YouTube puts, oh man, he's a danger to, YouTube puts, he's a danger to characteristics of people. And you know, notice they use the C word. You know, we all know what other word as a C word, closet. He's a danger to characteristics, of course. Of course he's a danger to characteristics because, you know, the closet field, you know, the closet plants we've been bringing and meeting together into a closet garden. You know, we got Kai Cenat in the shower with other men. You know what I'm saying? Kai Cenat, who told FBA guys they don't got culture, you know, but Kai Cenat's got culture for the shower. Then we got I Show Speed in the shower with Kai Cenat. Then we got I Show Speed. Look at his profile picture on YouTube, and then look at the, you know, the closeted activity of him interviewing and talking to man formers, you know. But you know, it's all part of the closet field. You know what I'm saying? What happens? You bring a closet plants, you bring multiple closet plants together. Kai Cenat, I Show Speed, Mr. Beast, Drewski, and the list goes on. You know what I'm saying? You even had, you can look it up, you had Kevin Hart, who wore a dress, show up to Kai Cenat dancing shirtless. You know, a guy over 40 years old. You know what I'm saying? Dancing shirtless for other men, you know? But hey, man, this is all part of the, you know, you bring multiple closet plants together, make a closet garden. You expand that closet garden, you make a closet field, you know? But, you know, what's funny about this video, 2025, what's hilarious, you know, is that look at where we are now, man. Look at full-time ghosting in 2025, man. You know, what is a full-time ghost, man? The full-time ghost is the man you can see. You can see this man. but you can't touch this man. You know what I'm saying? You could see this man, but you can't even get this man to meet you or talk to you. You can see this man, but you can't get this man to divert from what he's doing. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? What's happening right now, man, you know, because, you know, like I said, you know, the red pill is mainstream. You got channels with millions of subs interviewing them. You got Pierce Morgan interviewing them. You know what I'm saying? You got people talking about the red pill, the black pill. It's all mainstream now, you know? But what's happening right now, you know what I'm saying? The true future of men, you know? The future of men in the West, you know? We see the problem. It's men in the West and of course the East. Any country chasing the West that has demonized the authority of a heterosexual male. You know what I'm saying? Any country that has demonized the authority of a heterosexual male is now in the process of having nothing but roaming full-time ghosts, you know, men that you see these men working, you know what I'm saying? You see these men traveling, you know what I'm saying, doing what they gotta do, and you see zero stress. You know what's terrifying, you know, and full-time ghosting is happening. You hear a lot of women complaining about men ghosting them, but that's really part-time ghosting. You know what I'm saying? Part-time ghosting is when you ghost certain things in life, you know. It's not the full time where you've ghosted everything. You know what I'm saying? You've ghosted everything to where the only thing that matters is what you can control. You know what I mean? And what's terrifying them right now and what's coming, what's gonna be horrifying, because you gotta ask yourself, you're asking me, hold the truth hostage, man. What's gonna be the difference if full-time ghosting goes mainstream? You know, when the red pill is mainstream, when the black pill is mainstream, you know, when MGTOW is mainstream, what will be the difference? Hold the truth hostage, you know? What's gonna be the difference if full-time ghosting is mainstream? You know what I'm saying? What does that mean? You know, how does that affect society? You know, how does that affect the world we live in? You know what I'm saying? That's what you're wondering. Well, the major difference when, and it's already happening, the major difference when, as full-time ghosting, you know, goes mainstream is that it's gonna be in a situation where there's no control. You know what I'm saying? Not only there's no control, but there's no way to appeal to that man. You know, you're gonna hear it. Let me put my news reporter voice, you know, let me put my news reporter. This is Jet Johnson of CBS News. There's a plague of men roaming around the country that just seem to be there, but it can't seem to reach them or talk to them or anything. These men are just doing as they please, and it seems they're not participating in anything that we've previously seen back in the day. Holidays. You don't see these men celebrating holidays at the time that's scheduled. These men it's like a plague. It's a plague of men just walking around the country and doing as they please. What's going on here? And the other thing is, when we ask these men, are you worried about marriage? Are you worried about family? These men just reply with, why would I worry about something that doesn't exist? What is going on here? What is going on with a plague of men that seem to just roam around the country doing as they please with no thoughts on what other people think? It's as though we don't exist to them. What's going on here? What's going on here? It's like something I've never seen before. There's no reaching to these men. There's no appealing to these men. It's as though you can see them, but you can't reach them. You can't talk to them. What's going on here? And they're doing as they're pleasing. I saw a man celebrating the 4th of July in November. What's going on here? Yeah, what's going on here? It's as though it's a plague. And it seems that these men are just doing what they want, living their own lives without a care in the world. What's going on? Let me try to interview one of these men. Sir, you over there, you, sir. Oh, he just kept walking. It's as though he didn't hear me. Sir, can I talk to you? Oh, yeah, sure, I'll talk to you. How can I help you? Well, sir, there's a plague of men just such as yourself just walking around and roaming the country without any aspirations of pursuing anything that's traditional or tossed at them. Well, name's Hold the Truth Hostage. The founding father of full-time ghosting. And I think men are basically, with accepting what doesn't exist as an option for them, they're living within the truth of the world. They're not living in a fictional idealism. They're just, they've accepted what's going on. Whoa, hey, hold on, mister, hold the truth hostage, hold on. So what are you saying? But the men's rights activists, they fought for men's rights and men's freedom, and they fought to change the laws and the rules, Mr. Hold the Truth Hostage. Why would these full-time ghosting men not follow in the path of the men's rights activists? Why wouldn't they do that? Why are they following the MRA? Why wouldn't they follow on the red pill? Why are these full-time ghosting men, as you state, why aren't they fighting and seeking to change things? Well, I'll tell you why. Once a man accepts the truth of the matter and, isn't attached to some idealism that you have society promoting in movies and TV shows while ignoring the legal ramifications, what happens is these men realize that it costs money. It costs money. And in cases, it even requires a military to change things, So how can the men in America, for example, how can they gather trillions of dollars to change laws that are funded and supported by not only their domestic country, but overseas? So how can these men make these changes? The difference with full-time ghost is that they've accepted the truth, the true cost of the matter, and have accepting that, have made the logical decision for their life and well-being domestically. And they've realized that to follow in the footsteps of the MRA, men's rights activists, is just failure. And it would be just a bunch of men screaming and yelling and not only looking weak, but looking like a joke in the face of other men. That's what's happened. So what the men are doing in full-time ghosting, with understanding, they can still live their lives and they can still travel and fly around the world, is that men are accepting the legal stipulations set. And they're realizing they have one life. They got one life to live. So why would they waste their life stressing and pursuing a fantasy fiction that they just can't legally reach? Why would they do that? But Mr. Hold the Truth Hostage, that's giving up. That's giving up. Why are all these men giving up? Oh, wait a minute. He's walking away from me. He's leaving. He's walking away. And the major issue with this plague of men that are, as that Mr. Hold the Truth Hostage said, full-time ghosting, is that it's a plague without a timeline of when it will end. What if generations of men full-time ghost, where they're not dating, they're not having children, they're not even pursuing anything we imagine? What will this do to not only the economy, but certain promotional and certain traditions that depend on men pursuing what society deems their reality, such as the nuclear family, relationships, dating? What will happen if these men just continuously just roam the country, roam the world without any, with zero attachments, to what society deems what they must achieve and the reality they must pursue? What will happen to, for example, let's bring up wedding industry, the marriage industry. What will happen to that? What will happen to the child support industry with a family court? What will happen when just generations of men just are here, but it's as though they're ghosts? You can see these men, but you just can't reach, you just can't hold, you can't touch them. It's as though they go right through you. What will society do? You know what I'm saying? Yo, what's happening, man, is 2025 to 2030. It's only gonna keep expanding. You know what I'm saying? It's gonna keep spreading, and whatever country that is seeking to replicate the issues that are here domestically, and we've seen it. Seoul, Korea, birth rate in the toilet. You know what I'm saying? Colombia, birth rate in the toilet. You know what I'm saying? Every country that pursues that Western ideal of, putting the heterosexual male's authority and existence in a chain is basically vanishing, And then the fact that the men are traveling and flying in and out of the country, you know what I'm saying? And then what's happening with full-time ghosting is that, you see, there's a reason the government won't take this seriously, because you got to remember, there are more women than men. And the way the government is weighing it out, even though the women are aging out, you know what I'm saying? But the government has been spending over 30 years along the government, the corporations, the religions, the churches. They've been spending all this time telling and creating a scenario where the women are perfectly okay with having children, not only at an older age, but while they're inebriated, while their womb is filled with drugs and alcohol, So, the government has created this scenario, And what's going to happen is, also, the government has a minimum population requirement no one talks about. What is the minimum population requirement? Ask your AI. Ask AI, how many people would it actually take? What's the minimum population requirement to just run America? Run America. And you'll see. You'll realize that you're part of the surplus, But to get further back on things is that what's happening is the government won't care about what's happening until the female population has aged out beyond the point where they can profit from it. You know what I'm saying? Just imagine, they said right now, the highest single mothers now are age 30 and up, Just imagine when that becomes 40 plus. You know what I'm saying? At some point, even with all the drugs being promoted and pushed, there will be an age where just trying to have a child is extremely dangerous. You know what I'm saying? Extremely dangerous, not only to the child, but to the mother's health. You know what I'm saying? You're going to see a rise in stillborn children. You're going to see that. And what's happening with the full-time ghosting, which eventually the media will cover. The media can only stay silent on this for so long. But, we see the women talking about men ghosting, but, it's really a small population of the men the women are focused on, which are the men they've been trained to pursue as the only option. You know what I'm saying? So what's gonna happen, and you're gonna see this, is that eventually it's gonna be all the men. You know what I'm saying? And what I mean by all the men is that, the women don't care about the men they put into their friend zone. You know what I'm saying? Those men don't matter. You know what I mean? Those men don't matter at all. So what's gonna happen is when the men they pursue are ghosting completely. You know what I'm saying? When you can't reach a Chad, a Tyrone, an Aladdin, it's gonna start happening. And the news stations, the mainstream media is already dead. You know what I'm saying? The news stations don't control anything no more. Most people are watching things on the internet, So what's gonna happen is eventually it's gonna be covered that there's a plague. There's a plague of men that are basically ghosts. You can see them. You can see these men watching sports, drinking beer, celebrating their Thanksgiving, doing their holidays and all that stuff. There's a plague of these men, just like a ghost. You could see them. You could see a ghost, you know what I'm saying? But you can't touch or hold a ghost, So society will learn that you can't hold these men down, Nothing's working, you know what I mean? Nothing's working to hold these men. And what you're gonna see is they're gonna start promoting in the news that there's a plague. Because right now they're promoting it as the male loneliness epidemic. You know what I'm saying? That's how they're promoting it, as a male loneliness epidemic. But at some point they're gonna start promoting it, and it's gonna be revealed that these men are perfectly fine, living alone. One of the biggest scams society has promoted is that men and loneliness is a negative, when the truth is that men will chase loneliness. It's natural. You know what I'm saying? It's the situation was that marriage, a family, and so on was a way to have that man, though leading, not alone. You know what I'm saying? A wife, a girlfriend, and all that, they're supposed to offer something for that man to not, revert to just being alone, his natural state. And, he'll be with other men, his friends, playing games and so on. That's a part of life. Men will have friends and stuff, but the situation that's happened is that when family is no longer an option, when a man hears the word family and automatically thinks the family court, you know what I'm saying? When a man hears anything with family as a trap, anything with a long-term relationship as just risk with no reward, what happens is you're gonna have a situation where no men are pursuing marriage or anything like that. And what society is trying to create is this false narrative that, there's a male loneliness epidemic because the men aren't trying to get in relationships, date. It must be loneliness, right? Must be they don't qualify, instead of the men they've accepted the truth of the matter rather than the romanticized fiction. You know what I'm saying? The romanticized fiction that's been pushed on all men for, since, we'll just say for 15 years. I won't touch the 2000s. Let's just say 2010s to 2025. The narrative of men need to be sensitive. Men need to be open. Men need to have their feelings. They had a damn campaign where they said men cry too. You know what I'm saying? Everything was about feminizing and weakening men. The narrative was really being pushed that men should have no right to exist without replicating female tendencies, as in being weak. You know what I'm saying? Being weak and vulnerable, that men must sacrifice their manhood, their authority, their ability to lead without question, right or wrong. You know what I'm saying? To appeal to society. All that stuff when they would tell men, oh, be sensitive, be open, be revealing, that was all about appealing to society. You know what I'm saying? Appeal to society that you are vulnerable, that you are weak. You know what I'm saying? And now men have accepted in a large amount every day, every hour. It's growing, you know, especially now the internet is absolute. You know what I'm saying? Television is no longer, it plays no role. It plays no role in how men think anymore. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, television no longer plays a role in how men are thinking and pursuing life. You know what I'm saying? It's now just the reality of things, the truth. And the thing is this, and this is why the internet plays such a powerful role, and why every second, every minute, a man, it's probably per second to per minute, men are seeking and accepting ghosting. You know what I'm saying? Because here's the problem, and you know, YouTube has censored my channel. You know what I'm saying? YouTube has created a scenario where the only time I get views, because they've trained their AI and algorithm to basically identify my voice and everything like that, to where when I upload, they don't let people know nothing. Now, if I upload something with AI, you could even look at the channel where you'll see an AI video I've uploaded has gone over 700 views and so on. You know what I'm saying? Because, you know, AI is Google's product. They got to promote Google's product. You know what I'm saying? They got to promote that. You know, so that's what they're doing. But if I upload something, just a video of me talking, you know what I mean? You get the situation you see now, where odds are it'll get probably 50 views or less, because they have to limit and shut down what I'm saying, you know. But what's happening is this, you know, is that unlike the 2010s where TV entertainment still played a role, it was before, it was, you know, especially the early 2010s, it was way before everything was anti-male. You know what I'm saying? Way before Me Too, it was, you know what I mean? There was still a situation where, you know what I'm saying, pop culture and so on played a role in shaping male interest and male attitudes and aspirations and goals and all that. But now, in the situation we live in, where men basically aren't watching anything because it's all promoting an anti-straight male narrative, it's all about compromising your sexuality as a man, you know. Men aren't watching any of that crap. They're not playing video games unless it's older, you know, unless it's older from another country. Because what's happening is, you know, with the scam, they've said modern audience, you know, they said modern audience, you know what I mean? What's happened is now the media is basically in demonizing men, claiming the modern audience they're aiming for is everything anti-male authority and so on. That is the modern audience they're pursuing. You know what I'm saying? That's the modern audience, the pursuit of the anti-heterosexual male. You know, the modern audience now is the pursuit of, you know, the anti-straight male narrative. That's the modern audience. You know what I'm saying? So what's happening now with that being a modern audience is that men have realized anything made right now, especially from the US, with the modern audience in mind, isn't something they should be interested in. So that's eliminating a massive amount of video games, television, entertainment, streaming shows and all that. It's eliminating all that, you know what I'm saying? And what's happened now is men are now just pursuing and listening and watching what's on the internet. You know what I'm saying? What's on YouTube, what's on Rumble, what's on X. And here's the thing about that. And this is why full-time ghosting will just keep growing. You know what I'm saying? Like a plague without a limit, is that men such as myself, men uploading content, they're uploading faster than the mainstream can keep up with. CBS News, you know what I'm saying? Think about it. CBS, all these news stations that are all about demonizing men, they can't keep up with the amount of content the individual men can upload, Think about it. The country has about, America alone has over 300 million population. Out of that 300 million, over 100 million men in this country. You know what I'm saying? So when you think about that, over 100 million men in this country, just imagine if 5% of those men are constantly uploading content, constantly talking about what's going on, what it means to be a man in America and so on, How can CBS, how can all these mainstream media outlets keep up with that? You know what I'm saying? How can they keep up with that when every time, and even channels such as myself, which they shadow ban my channel, you know what I'm saying? Another guy just started his channel. You know what I'm saying? He might be replicating what I've said. He might be saying his own things. But one thing he's saying, is he's saying, man, avoid domestic, domestic relationship investments. You know what I'm saying? Even the red pillars and so on, they create the red pill and MGTOW and, a lot of these other aspects, they create friction. You know what I'm saying? Red pillar will tell you why you should still be invested, the type of women you should still be looking for, and all that BS. Kevin Samuels was training men, be a high value man and look for high value women, AKA be a high value target. The red pill teaches men make some money, then create an opportunity to provide an opportunity to a woman to take your money. That's why a mass majority of red pill content is them interviewing OnlyFans models, streetwalkers, 304s and all that. It's all designed with that in mind, It ain't designed to help no damn man. You know what I'm saying? You try to name a big red pill channel that's interviewed a married couple. You know what I'm saying? Did Kevin Samuels even interview a married couple or have married couple activities? No. Come on, man. Most of his content was average at best. Even though no matter how average a woman is, they all have above average to absolutely dominant advantage over men legally. So what does it matter if a woman's average? You know what I'm saying? You think the court system will look at a woman and say, oh, you're fat and you're average, you're built like a buffalo, you're buffalo built, piglet built, we gonna give you less money for divorcing this man because you're average at best. Nope, they're giving her the whole pie. You know what I mean? Look up Michael Jordan's wife. Look, the list goes on. Look up these average women. What happens? They all get the same check. You know what I mean? And then, you got MGTOW where you'll have men just, dedicate their walking away from society based around the women versus their own goals and ideals, which if it's all your own goals and ideals, the women wouldn't even play a role in it. You know what I'm saying? I remember some guys in the black pill told me, oh, it's missing towel. Men sent their own way. You know, there's many of those where you'll just see guys avoid accountability. You know, they won't accept that volunteers can't be victims. They'll avoid accountability that, yo, you made your choice, man. You can't blame your wife for you agreeing to place yourself in an absolute disadvantage. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, you got the black pill, you know what I'm saying? You know, going on where there's a more study or whatever going on. And but at the end, you know, that's still a perspective of where the man is somewhat affected by the women and all this and that. You know, you make a lot of black pill content, you know. But what's happening with full-time ghosting is that, man, the men are accepting that, you know, relationships are like Santa Claus. Relationships are like, you know what I'm saying? They're like the invisible, they're like an imaginary friend. It doesn't exist. And the danger in the eye of the media, the danger this will create, because, you know, you had the black pill telling men, well, you got to look this way, you got to look that way, you know what I'm saying, to get female attraction, attention, you know what I'm saying? They're only going after a certain type of men, right? But the full-time ghost is telling a guy nothing about that. The full-time ghost isn't talking about your looks or nothing like that because, you know what I'm saying? What does that matter when legally it all leads to a dead end? None of this, you know what I'm saying? It's not even that it doesn't matter. You know, full-time ghost, it doesn't exist. How can something exist as an issue when legally it's the means to your destruction? You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like, you know, drinking gasoline and lighting a match, you know, isn't good for you. It could basically, you know, end your life, whatever, right? So why would men be talking about that? Why would that even exist as an option to even talk about, even think about doing? You know what I'm saying? That's what's happening with full-time ghosting, is that looks theory, the way you look, none of that matters. It's not even that, none of that exists in the mind. You know what I'm saying? That's fiction. Because there is there's not even a chance men are, when you're a full-time ghost and you're pursuing that, or even that exists as an option. It's kind of looked as, why would I live stream, for example, and say, hey, I want to introduce you to my invisible friend? You know what I'm saying? You know, you hear that? You hear how that sounds? I want to introduce you to my invisible friend. That sounds crazy. That's what's happening when men are full-time ghosting and thinking about, you know, talking about relationships, marriage, dating, and all that. They're looking at it as speaking about something that doesn't exist. It doesn't exist as an option. Why would I, as a man, have any notions, any thoughts about something that doesn't exist as an option? And why would I be talking about something to pursue fiction in real life? You know what I'm saying? It's like a man coming to you and saying, I want to marry my anime waifu. You know what I'm saying? You gotta look at him like he's crazy. You want to marry a fictional character? You're crazy. You know what I'm saying? This is what's happening. And unlike all the others, you know, the black pill, the red pill, and all this stuff that's come before, what's happening with full-time ghosting is, man, there is no end in sight for this. You know, it's really a game of what happens when you have, for example, you know, I did the philosophy, you know, there's a whole different levels of thinking when you look at that. And I'll be doing some more content on that soon. But, each pill describes a different type of man. The red pill is a domesticated man. All their issues and their focus is domestic. And you have somebody like Andrew Tate is the silver pillar, who's traveled and lived all over the world, who's trying to, scam and set up men with an orange pill narrative domestically. An orange pill is when you view your domestic location as the globe, as the world. Basically, it's like a guy in the United States saying all women are like the women in the United States, as in all women are under the same laws as the United States, the same culture as the United States. That's the orange pill. The orange pill is a man who internalizes his domestic setting as the global setting. You know what I'm saying? And it's dangerous. It's ended up taking lives of, you got Renegade One who died from the orange pill. You know what I'm saying? You got a lot of men that have died from the orange pill. There's a lot of men basically taking their lives due to the orange pill, when a man basically has now deemed the world as his domestic setting. There is no hope. There's no hope at all. You know what I'm saying? There is no hope. There is no way to live, because now once you internalize the world as your domestic location, you can't see anything outside of the issues. And then to actually get into that level is to actually set yourself up to where you're so absorbed by the domestic issues as your identity that you can't exist beyond it. You can't see your freedom as a man. You know what I'm saying? But like I said, what's happening is this, man. And it's happening. What's happening with full-time ghosting is that men are roaming and living with zero attachments to fiction and romanticized pursuits for men that set them up to be victims of the legal ramifications of their choices in volunteering, because volunteers can't be victims, and what's happening. And the problem in the eyes of society for this perspective is that you can't, once a man starts full-time ghosting, once you start moving with the ideal that zero idealism, zero attachments, the only thing you're attached to is what you can control in an absolute level. You know what I'm saying? Your life, what you're doing, nothing else. Nothing else matters. Everything you do is within that perspective. You know what I'm saying? Within that perspective of how you live your life. And what's gonna happen is that society will eventually reach the point where that's the type of men they see. And it's gonna be like a plague. It's already happening, but by 2026, it's gonna keep growing. Because, like I said, the mainstream media can't keep up. It can't keep up with the men uploading content by the hundreds of thousands, talking about the male perspective and what's going on. Whether it's full-time ghosting or MGTOW, red pill, black pilled, whatever. You know what I'm saying? They can't keep up. And YouTube is looking at it as they're not paying YouTube enough, and YouTube can't silence all of the male voices anyway. So you're having a situation where the mainstream media can't conceal. Then the other thing that's happening is that women are getting involved. There are women that are basically, like I said, simp hunting or sympathy hunting, where these women are making their careers now talking about other women, the issues with other women and what's going on between men and women, but from a perspective of that's becoming their only way to socialize with men and try to extract attention and money from the men, which is to talk about the issues with women. But like I said with full-time ghosting, what's happened is a lot of men realize these women are just talking. You know what I'm saying? A woman's sexuality, a woman's age, those things are no longer being useful as bait to lead a man to marriage, lead a man to long-term relationships, and so on. It's not working anymore. You know what I'm saying? So now they're trying to hustle this sympathy that they sympathize with men, simp hunting. You know what I'm saying? Women building their entire content around male talking points, or basically surrounding themselves with majority of men that make content. You know what I'm saying? To talk and literally parrot their talking points. And it's you got your Just Pearlies and some other people. You got some women. And the other thing is, we men have realized that YouTube inflates female content creators anyway. We know YouTube bots them and gives them views anyway. We already know the fiction. But another thing is that men have arrived, like I said, with full-time ghosting. A lot of men are arriving at, man, all y'all women are doing is talking. You're not even going to change.org to say change the law. There's not a woman online advocating to change the law, because they know they benefit from it. They know they enjoy it. They got girlfriends. They got nieces. You know what I'm saying? You think a woman out there is not thinking about her niece getting married? Her girlfriend getting married? Come on, man. The men realize what's going on. You know what I'm saying? The men realize what's going on. And the men realize that the women are basically, it's all bait. It's all talk. All that talk doesn't mean nothing when the actions don't change the law or nothing like that. And like I said earlier on in this video, as men move with the perspective that men accept the law for what it is and the resources truly needed to change the law, men are moving accordingly. You know what I'm saying? Men are moving accordingly, and unlike the men's rights activists, the full-time ghost accepts it for what it is. Full-time ghost understands that you gotta volunteer. You have to volunteer to be a victim, and volunteers can be victims. The full-time ghost is understanding that you're not drafted into being a husband. You get what I'm saying? You're not drafted. You're not drafted to be a boyfriend and so on. You know what I'm saying? There's no force behind it. I've been saying this for over 5 years that, men are all right, but back then I didn't have this quote, volunteers can be victims. I used to say that, man, men have to make a decision. Men have to choose. Men have to volunteer, for their issues to happen, But as more men accept this perspective that they have to volunteer, they got to volunteer to be a victim, then they realize, well, I just won't volunteer. And I'm not being drafted. I'm not being drafted into being a husband. You know what I'm saying? I'm not being drafted into marriage, relationships, and all that. So the men, knowing this, are moving accordingly. And what's happening is the men that are full-time ghosting on the chessboard are basically in a situation with the government. It's a waiting game. It's a waiting game to see who will surrender first. And right now, as the government loses more on the birth rate continues to decline. Far less children are being born and far less men are having kids. Then again, more men are stepping away from traditions, idealization, the nuclear family and all this stuff. The government will eventually start seeing this, and it won't be ignored. Now, they've set 2030. They said by 2030, 45% of women will be single and childless. You know what I'm saying? And I think they added women about the age of 25 to 40, when the truth is it's going to be worse than that. It's going to be, it's going to be from high school, to 40 to 50 plus. You know what I'm saying? It's going to be over 45%. You know what I'm saying? The media makes sure that it counts things a little different. But what's going to happen is, as more men and boys in high school are starting to full-time ghost, you know what I'm saying? It's just going to be the natural thing to be ghosting. You know what I'm saying? Especially after Conan 19. After Conan 19 had a lot of men stay at home, to where the men, a lot of boys going to high school or college were not allowed to basically participate outside anyway. So it's become natural for them to be introverts, so there's a lot going on. And now on the board, as it increases, as like a plague, full-time ghosting, you're gonna see it's coming, where the media won't be able to avoid that. Man, there's just a population of men in the country where you see them, but you don't see them doing or participating, and you can't bait or control, and they're not stressed at all. You know what I'm saying? They're not stressed at all, man. I predicted this. You got men. I predicted this, in a homie JP, explained it years back. You got the whole videos, and we spoke about this over 4 years ago. That's how far ahead we are. Like I be telling people, when I make content, I'm 5 to potentially over 20 years my time, and sometimes even over 50 years my time. There's a price of knowing you're ahead of your time. When you know you're ahead of your time, you're always looking back and realizing present day, any news now is just old news. It's not new to you. If you're over 20 years ahead of what's going on, how can anything be new? A lot of it's just confirming your old theories, So, a lot of content being made now is about all men are finding their peace and this and that. But, what's happening is that, men finding their peace and this, and they don't want the women to break it up and this and that, You know what I'm saying? That's still men that basically think about, there's a level of thought about the women playing a role in their life, What's happening, and you're going to see it, is what's happening is you're going to have a bunch of men where, like I said, in full-time ghosting, they're absolutely at peace, because anything that is offered to them that is fiction doesn't exist. You know what I'm saying? These men do not think or even have, fiction as an option. You know what I'm saying? Once fiction isn't an option and only what exists, these men aren't stressing at all. You know what I'm saying? They got nothing to do with their peace. It's just, dude, I'm living my life, man. A man knows that your peace could be interrupted at any time. Something could break down in your house. Your car could break down or something like that, flooding, whatever, What's happening is the men are existing in a state where they only focus on what exists. That's it. I made a video years back, I made it years back. It's existence. I made a video called Existence Over Purpose. You know what I'm saying? Existence over purpose. A precursor to full-time ghosting. I've been working my way towards this full-time ghosting philosophy for quite some time. But what's happening is men are placing their existence above all. You know what I'm saying? Anything that's a threat to your existence, you won't participate in. And like I said, as full-time ghosting starts taking over, and it's just going to keep expanding, it ain't going to be the sometime ghosting where, oh man, the men are contacting the women and then they ghost them. No, man. Full-time ghosting is the men can't be reached at all. You know what I'm saying? The men can't be reached, you know? Marriage rates, you know, you have the narrative that they're focusing on marriage rates, you know? They're focusing on the marriage rates, but they're not focusing on the interaction rates, you know? And, you know, that this is where full-time ghosting is heavily impacting society, is the interaction rates. Where's the numbers, where's the math on the fact that the women can't even access the men to interact? You know what I'm saying? Where's that? You know? That's where full-time ghosting is taking effect, is that because men, you know, a woman that can even contact, email a man or try to talk to him, you know what I mean? That's where that, you know, part-time ghosting is, you know what I'm saying? There's still an opportunity to interact with that man. What's happening now is with full-time ghosting, you have to understand, is that men will now they're treating society, as I've said this over 5 years ago, that, you know, there is no such thing as a man not working. When you live in an anti-male society, you know, and a male limitation society, there is no such thing as you're not working. So what happens when men treat society as their job? What happens? What happens when men say, yo, when I'm outside, I'm at work? Society is now a job. You know what I'm saying? Society is now a job. So what happens at work, right? It's frowned upon for a man to interact with his female coworker with pursuits of a relationship, right? You know what I'm saying, right? So what happens when men now put this on the whole nation, on a national perspective, that this society is work? You know what I'm saying? It's going to work. So why would I, if I'm at work, why would I be trying to talk intimately or try to, you know what I'm saying, get sexual access to the women at my job? You know what I'm saying? That's what's happening. Once the men view society in that manner, you know what I'm saying, where it's work. You know what I'm saying? The only time I'm off work, and this is why you hear content, men value their peace, but they don't have the holistic thinking. They're still attached to this society. They're not full-time ghosting. They're too attached to idealism, you know what I'm saying, to be able to speak the way I'm speaking. You know what I'm saying? What's happening is men are now internalizing, you know, their nation as work. You know what I'm saying? Their nation is work. It's their job. So once men internalize that their entire nation is work, what happens is the men will behave accordingly. You know what I'm saying? And especially after Me Too, after the Me Too situation, men are now treating the nation as Me Too. You know what I'm saying? Men are treating the nation as Me Too. And, you know, I plan to do a video on dating and relationships, why men aren't participating in that also, and why the women are actually been programmed to absolutely devalue the meaning of interaction with a man that isn't their boss. You know what I'm saying? I mean, a man that isn't their boss has no long-term value, you know, even though their boss definitely has no long-term value, because at any moment that company could go out of business, they could be laid off. You know what I'm saying? There's not a woman that could look at her career where she works and says, yeah, this is going to be here for the next 50, 60, 80 years. Nope, I'm sorry. You know what I'm saying? Where the store closing, this business and that business closing. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, like I said, man, the full-time ghosting is taking place, man. And as this takes place, the plague, you know what I'm saying, the plague of ghosts, you know, the haunting, I guess you could call it that, the haunting. It's going to be haunting society, you know, it's going to be haunting all the West, all the male limitation societies that are basically all about limiting the heterosexual male, demonizing the heterosexual male, that now there's a plague. There's a plague of ghosts. These men work. These men still enjoy themselves, full-time ghosting. You still going to the bar, still enjoying your life. You still have fun and all this and that. That's where full-time ghosting is extremely different, is that these men are still outside. These men are still living their lives. These men can still be seen at bars. These men can still be seen celebrating some holidays, at the beach, chilling. These men aren't hiding from society. You know what I'm saying? That's what's so different about full-time ghosting, is that what am I hiding for? You know what I'm saying? Why would I be hiding from society? I just know what about society and aspects of society I won't be participating in. I accept what is fictional within my society. You know what I'm saying? I accept when they're trying to sell me, when they're trying to give me some system guidance towards fiction. You know what I'm saying? I accept that and I move accordingly. And that's what's happening. You're gonna see a lot of men, and it's gonna be far more. You had Leonardo DiCaprio, but they interviewed him. He's living a bachelor's life, whatever. But what happens when the United States and all these countries pursuing the West? Because a lot of guys don't want to accept that. Asia is pursuing the West, so China is pursuing the West. This is why China made a law where it determined how many children a man could have. So there are countries chasing the West, and like I said earlier in this video, their birth rates are dropping. Colombia birth rate dropping. You know what I'm saying? China. You know what I'm saying? South Korea. Japan, Italy. Spain. The list goes on. Russia, Germany, and all that. The list goes on. What do they all have in common? It's a government overstepping its boundary when it comes to male authority. You know what I'm saying? And they are all paying that price, which is the death without war. You know what I'm saying? The death without war, the death without battle. It's when a man just lets a country die without providing it a seed. The man plants no seed in that soil. And that's what's happening. That's what's happening to many countries around the world. You know what I'm saying? If they interfere with men, be it from authority with their family, they interfere with men being able to express themselves, start businesses, innovate, they suffer. You know what I'm saying? They will suffer the casualties of that, which is that country dying from within. You know what I'm saying? Dying from within. The men aren't giving any seeds, and it's dying, and the men aren't even talking about it. You know what I'm saying? The full-time ghosting it's global. You know what I mean? You're gonna see it just keep rising. But this has been Hold the Truth Hostage, where if the truth was so important, we wouldn't negotiate with lies. We would hold the truth hostage. Full-time ghosting isn't an option. It's the only choice. Full-time ghost. We are living in a time of no secrets. Nothing is hidden. Anyone telling you otherwise, they're part of the system guidance, and they're seeking to guide you towards the system of believing fallacy and adapting fiction as something that exists. All right, peace.